got curious about beekeeping. And I went on bee removal with a man named Jean-Claude Barut. And that was just a really beautiful, magical, I don't know, ancestral, like vibrational experience for me that just made me completely captivated with bees and what they were doing, their connection to the food system, but also the wild world and pollination. The driving force for me is like how do we maintain and conserve genetic diversity in this organism? Bees really, they're sort of this like wild but managed species because we've had a relationship with them for so long. Practices, our ways of being with them have really been imprinted on them as much as they've imprinted on us. And so it feels important to me that we are in good stewardship. And it feels to me like the way to get to good stewardship is through good genetic maintenance and conservation, right? And that is like going to help us better address things like new pests that emerge and new diseases that emerge because we will have a diverse set of bees who can survive and adapt to the whatever the heck is coming next.
Hello, friends. It's Donna Bell, your host of To Hum is Human, the podcast where we explore how tuning into our intuition helps us express our most passionate purpose. I appreciate you taking the time to listen today. This episode, Building Futures One Queen at a Time, invites us into a different kind of listening, the kind that happens in fields and orchards, inside wooden hive boxes, and in the subtle vibration of wings. We're talking about leadership, land, equity, and the intelligence of the hive. I think you're going to love my next guest. Ang Roell is the co-leader of the 300 Hive operation at They Keep Bees, where they focus on queen and honey production while designing educational programming for their workforce development initiatives. Ange helped establish a sustainable apiary management training program called Queen School, a powerful model that has trained 35 BIPOC and LGBTQ plus farmers and 75 emergent professional beekeepers in the art and science of ethical hive stewardship. Ange is a 2021 GRIST 50 Fixer, a founding member of the Adaptive Bee Breeders Alliance, co-founder of the Northeast LGBTQ plus and BIPOC Beekeepers Network, and a certified instrumental insemination practitioner. Welcome, Ange.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, Ange, when did bees first enter your life, not just as insects, but as teachers?
I got introduced to bees living down in Miami and starting to visit and volunteer at urban farms there. Not even going to tell you what year that was because it was a long good time ago. But then I sort of at that time had a different career path. I was in the education field and I moved from Florida to Massachusetts to pursue my master's in education. And I had a very specific school I wanted to work with and at, and a very specific praxis I was focused on. But sort of in that journey, I was introduced to a lot of environmental educators and organizers and activists. And as part of that, I got curious about beekeeping. And I went on a bee removal with a man named Jean-Claude Barut, and he was a French beekeeper who was living in the US at the time. And we went and picked up this big, like a whiskey cask or a wine cask, those big, like 55-gallon drums.
Yes.
But it was a wooden cask and bees had moved in there, and then the hive had gotten a little aggressive. And so this gentleman that had it wanted us to take it off site. And so my first task with bees was to open up that wine cask and move the hive from that to like a box so it could be introduced into an apiary. You have to be able to inspect hives by law in the state of Massachusetts. So we had to move it from one place to another. And that was just a really beautiful magical, I don't know, ancestral, like vibrational experience for me that just made me completely captivated with bees and what they were doing, and their connection to the food system, but also the wild world and pollination. And I've been kind of at it ever since.
Oh my gosh, just visualizing what that must have looked like the first hive you opened. What did you feel or sense when you
Hmm.
lifted the cover or whatever you had to open first? What were you
Yeah,
feeling?
like, my most clear memory of this is just this, like, I'm standing in Jean-Claude had his apiary or bee yard at a place that was, like, conserved land, but it had, like, community gardens, and then there was, like, a little spot kinda tucked away in the trees where the bees were. And I'm standing in that space, and he started to, like, cut the combs and hand them to me to rubber band into frames, and there's just like tens of thousands of bees around. And it was a small hive, and it had a lot of drones or male bees who are very buzzy. And so they're just loud. So it was just like overwhelmingly but meditatively loud. That's like what I
Mm,
remember the most. And just being
okay.
like, this is really cool.
This is really cool. And I can actually visualize that and actually feel that too. That's
Yeah.
something that just kind of
Like,
travels through your body. But
yeah, and it's odd. I have a lot of sensory processing challenges. I'm very sensitive to sound and to vibration, and so I would almost think beekeeping wouldn't be something I liked, right?
hmm.
Because it's very attuned to those two elements. I don't know, like actually experiencing it, I was like, "Oh, I could do this."
They were just sort of welcoming you and saying, okay, here we are. It's time to work
It's
with us.
it's just I don't know, it's just not an unsettling sound, you know? It's
Mm,
just like something that makes you feel vibrationally connected, I guess.
mm, mm. Well, in 2016, you didn't just become a beekeeper. You built
Mm.
stock from scratch with the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources with a seed grant. What did that first year actually look like on the ground?
Yeah, that very first year, my partner and I ran a small greens farm together, and then we sort of stopped working together as farmers and were back in the education field. When I got that grant, I was more a teacher than a beekeeper, but I was able to build out my first apiary on my farm. So it looked like putting up fences, clearing, not like clear cutting, but just like clearing meadow area so that we could place hive stands and have hives, and it looked like getting to know the space a little bit. We started with that 1 yard in Montague, and we now have, like, 7 or 8 yards in Montague, because
Mm,
you can't have all your hives in one place, and you don't
mm.
really need to own the land that you keep your bees on. It's actually really advantageous to have bees on other people's property, to have your bees sort of in multiple locations. But this was our first, and so it just looked like establishing that infrastructure and testing it and seeing what worked and what didn't, and putting up bad fences and taking them down and putting up good fences.
A lot of learning. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of learning happened during that time. But speaking of expanding, you built 60 hives, now up to a 300 hive operation.
Mhm.
They keep bees tens hives in Western Massachusetts, now North Carolina, and on the central coast of Florida. What changes for you practically and energetically when you move between these bioregions?
Ooh, what a big question. So from 2019 until 2025, we were moving between all three of those locations. Actually, in 2026, we're completely stationary in Western Mass, which
Mm,
is really exciting, but it also leaves me in a space where I'm very reflective about that time, which was rich and beautiful for me for a lot of reasons, but is also now like coming to a close, right? And Vaykeepies is thinking more about how we can be stationary and regional and bioregional in Western Mass. But being able to be a migratory beekeeper for the first 6 or 7 years that we were building out our stock and learning how to raise queens well means that we sort of got a double season. So we would have a season of queen and honey production in the southeast, and then a season in the northeast when we brought some of our bees north. And so it really sort of allowed us to like learn very quickly how to do things well and systemically and expand our production colonies here in the Northeast. Unfortunately, last year we lost hives in Hurricane Helene in North
Mm,
Carolina. And also, we're close to a lot of disaster in Central Florida. And so we've really made the decision to become more stationary because we want to invest in where we are, given what we've seen happening with the climate in the last while, but
uh-huh.
particularly to us in the last 2 years. Yeah.
Mm, mm. Well, you harvest honey,
Hmm.
honeycomb, beeswax. Is it
Hmm.
propolis?
Yes. Yeah.
And produce queens and starter hives. Which of those do you feel most aligned with your mission and why?
Yeah, when I think about it from the framework of like I don't know if it's purpose for me, but just like what drives me, the like puzzle I'm trying to figure out, the thing I'm trying to contribute to when I'm like doing my work in the world. I think it is queens, like the
Mm,
production of queens, the understanding of what it takes to maintain a genetic line, which leads to understanding the history of queen bees in the United States and what kinds of bees have been brought here to the US because they're not endemic to the United States, what sort of like bottlenecks in genetics and in bee health that has led to over time. Understanding all of that history and learning how to do it in practice simultaneously for me makes it the thing I'm like, that's like driving everything else. You know what I
mm,
mean?
mhm,
It's like the queens, I love the wax. All I eat for sugar is honey. Like everything is like a part of a system.
mm,
The driving force for me is like how do we maintain and conserve genetic diversity in this organism that bees really they're sort of this wild but managed species because we've
mhm,
had a relationship with them for so long. Our practices, our ways of being with them have really been imprinted on them as much as they've imprinted on us.
mhm,
And so yeah, it feels important to me that we are in good stewardship, and it feels to me like the way to get to good stewardship is through good genetic maintenance and conservation, right? And
mm,
that is like going to help us better address things like new pests that emerge and new diseases that emerge because we will have a diverse set of bees who can survive and adapt to the whatever the heck is coming next.
Well, it's interesting because I was reading about the types of bees you started off with, and how do you balance the tradition, the science, and the innovation, especially with practices like instrumental insemination, while staying in right relationship with the bees?
Yeah, totally. For me, what instrumental insemination lets us do is maintain that genetic diversity because bees are what is it called? I believe it's called extreme polyandry, which means that bees are always trying to mate with the most, like queen bees' objective is to mate with the most drones possible. And what instrumental insemination lets us do is collect semen samples from like hundreds of drones at the same
Mm,
time, which allows us to maintain that genetic diversity, but also separate out the family lines. So we're sort of conserving a
mm,
wider genetic diversity than we could if we were just open mating hives.
mm,
And a limitation in the US of like, there are places in the world where it is easier to do sort of closed mating systems where you're isolating one type of bee over here and one type of bee over here. So you're maintaining those lines. There's some crossover, but they're also not creating a like genetic bottleneck. But here, because we have the food system that we have, because we have the migration of bees in the ways that we do, it's really difficult to do that. Not
mm,
impossible, but very, very difficult. And so the insemination allows us to capture those moments also of the genetics so that we can revive certain lines, so that we can cross certain lines if they're showing a real added value to the species. So, yeah, I guess that for me, I see the science that we know now and could know in the future as a way to actually be in right relationship. We have had so much influence on this creature that to be in right relationship, we need to actually be working harder than we can in the setup that we have right now. And like
mm,
that's to build to a future that looks different than that.
mm.
In my eyes, in my opinion, but it's where we are now. And so it's like we need to use the tools that we have to
Mm.
maintain what we have, to capture each genetic moment of what we have. So we have like more diversity because the things we need to adapt to are coming at a much rapider pace than they
Yes.
were
Yeah.
before.
Need to adapt quickly.
And
Yes.
we need to know the true science, and we need
Hmm.
to value that science and apply that in our practices so that we can continue to adapt and be responsive. It's just, there's a lot of really beautiful theory and desire to connect with honeybees. And
Mm.
I truly appreciate that. And I see a deep relationship with us and them. And for me, I understand to a degree the science. I know what it takes in practice. And I see like my specific role in the world of beekeeping, but also teaching, is to translate this stuff, is to do this work and then help translate this to other folks so they can either do this work or better understand what the hell I'm talking about.
Right. Well, let's just go back to basics here for our listeners, Ange. So people love the phrase queen bee, but it's
Mhm.
actually used incorrectly. What does the queen actually do all day?
Oh, I love this question. Okay, so there are three types of bees, right? And this is just like our language for them. I think always important to remember, like, because our relationship with them is that they are kind of a livestock animal to us. I think we anthropomorphize them a lot, just like we do our dog or cat or,
Uh-huh.
a goat or whatever. This is our language. It's limited by our understanding of them. But the three words we have are worker, which are like the sister bees that are laid by the queen bee. And they come from different families, but they are all sort of related by matrilineal relation. And they do all of the work of the hive. They do all of the cleaning. They do all of the brood or young management. They do all of the foraging and harvesting for resources. And they protect the hive. And then you have drone bees who are bisex male bees. Their role is to basically spread the genetic seed of that particular hive and that particular queen and all the drones she's mated with. So they do a lot of flying and trying to have sex just one time. And during that one time, they sort of like invert or implode when they ejaculate.
That's a visual.
And speak of purpose, that is their entire purpose. Like that is
Wow.
like ideally what they are doing is going as far as they can and spreading the genetics of that particular hive. And that's again that other extreme polyandry. Like every hive is like trying to shoot its drone seeds out as far as it can. And it's trying to reproduce using the queen as the reproductive mechanism. So a queen bee is actually in charge of just one thing in the hive. She's in charge of, first after she's born, mating with as many drones as she can in about a 2-week period by flying out a number of times
Uh-huh.
of the hive to mate in the air. And then coming back and beginning to lay eggs in that hive. And that's her only job. She doesn't feed herself. She doesn't clean herself. She doesn't really leave the hive again unless that hive is reproducing and swarming, which is how they split into two. They'll like
Mm.
send the old queen and a collection of bees out, and then
Mm.
they'll have a young queen emerge in this original location as their like next generation.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, but I know we should talk about other things too. So, beekeeping gets romanticized, right? We see the golden
Mhm.
light, the slow motion, honey pours, but land access and agricultural training haven't been equitable in this.
Mm-mm.
What systems are you actively trying to rewrite through your work? And I know part of it is through your school.
Hmm. Yeah. I think two things. One, I think I'm a first generation farmer, so I don't come from a farming family, didn't study farm like agriculture in college, really mostly self-taught through like self-directed learning and pursuits. And so I think just running a viable farm and having that identity is in of itself an example of that is possible, which feels important
Yes.
to me. It is
Mm.
hard. Resources need to come from elsewhere, but it is
Mhm.
possible. That feels really important. It feels very important for me to live into my identity as a queer and non-binary person in that space and to be building relationships from there where I can be an accomplice to BIPOC farmers and BIPOC beekeepers and other queer and trans folks. And I also think that I have a specialized technical skill and the ability and like an educational background. And I confuse those things to help
Mm.
other people figure out how to access this industry or access this like beekeeping as a practice in a way
Mm.
that's sustainable and gives them something to give back to their community, whether that's honey or educational opportunities or other hive products that might come from them being able to sustain and make a part of their living off of beekeeping.
Mm. Well, and I know you train people to raise queens.
I do.
What's the most common misconception students bring into queen school?
I don't know that it's like I could pinpoint a misconception, but I think it's just like there's something about understanding the cycle of how a queen goes from an egg to a queen cell to an emerged queen to a mated queen. Understanding that life cycle and then framing that in the life cycle of the hive, both how long the workers live and how long the hive lives throughout the season, really helps our participants understand how to manage their hives well, right? And so, like, even if they don't go on to be professional beekeepers or run their own operation, they're able to manage whatever hives they choose to have better because they have an understanding of the many life cycles happening throughout the season inside of their hives. And that understanding just takes widening the lens of what you understand about the science and biology of the hive, right? So it
Mm.
really, we're helping both professionals, but we're also helping everyone who's around bees wrap their brains around it a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we were just talking about the queen, the queen.
Mhm.
Queen doesn't control the hive in a human sense.
Mhm.
What does that teach you about leadership structures that we built in our own systems?
Yeah, great question. For my background in education, I was always really interested and compelled by non hierarchical leadership structures. So, student led learning, peer to peer knowledge share. I've always been fascinated with how people learn, particularly because we have so many complicated power dynamics in the US and then so many neurodivergences that we've yet to even wrap our arms all the way around. Like,
Hmm.
that I was always compelled by this concept in that work. Coming into beekeeping and thinking about designing any kind of beekeeping training, it was really important to me that that be a part of it, right? So when I'm facilitating these trainings, there are always multiple teachers, there are always people at different levels who are facilitating, maybe for the first time, or maybe a much more experienced facilitator than those of us that are hosting, right? So there's these different identities and dynamics happening in the leadership, and then we're supporting the next level of leaders to learn and step into their leadership. And then in tandem with that, they're supporting sort of the newer people in the group so that we're creating these waves of peer to peer learning up and down the experience level. So that's always been really important. And it's both important for me in teaching and in network building and in building the collaborations that we have. So I take that relational framework and apply it like across all of those spaces because it's my business and I can do that.
Well, wouldn't it be amazing if most businesses use that model?
Right.
Wouldn't
But
that
it's
be
like,
interesting?
again, I think I'm very much operating a beekeeping business and I'm making part of my living tending to hives and making products from those hives. That being a viable business then allows me to give additional time strategizing how to make the systems around us work better for everyone.
Mm. Mm. Well, now you co-lead They Keep Bees with Beekline.
Yeah.
So they co-lead the apiary management aspect, and they're
Mhm.
also planting over 100 chestnut trees at the home apiary, which is very cool.
Mhm.
What have you learned about partnership from
Yeah.
co-running an operation at this scale?
Biggest takeaway for me is that beekeeping is it's really a thing that you have to learn by doing. And so how do we create the space to work together, but always hold space for each other's like learning edge, right? So like if bee wants to try feeding these 10 hives some additional protein or nutrition that will help support them, I'm always game for an experiment. that may have a positive impact on our bees. And I think we do that for each other so that we always get to be on our learning edge. Right now, I'm trying to deepen my knowledge in instrumental insemination and germplasm collection so I can work with a team to conserve more honeybee genetics across the US, not just from my own stock.
Mm,
And B is really supportive of me dedicating a certain number of hours to making sure I'm trying to build that capacity for myself and for the business. Yeah. And I'm always trying to support their management practices and management learning as they're going through and be like, oh, yeah, you should try that. And really just that yes and encouragement gets us really far in being able to always feel like we're on a growing edge and also supported in our collaboration.
mm. Well, I'd like to talk about another aspect here, Ange. What does repair look like in agriculture? Not as an idea, but more of a practice, if you will.
Yeah, that's such a big question. I think it can, I don't even know if I can really speak on this.
I just thought I'd throw it out there anyway. Well, I think maybe just as you were saying, working with certain types of characteristics that help these colonies survive and are
Yeah.
more resilient, perhaps
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is a
yeah.
way of repairing. But I didn't know if there were other ways you
Yeah,
felt.
I mean, I think certainly the genetic conservation and focusing our attention and energy there to, I don't know if that's repair or just conservation. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm,
how much, I think there's still a lot of science between us and being able to recover lines that we've potentially lost to our inability to manage them well. I think it's possible, but it's like, it may be possible in my lifetime, but I don't know if we're doing that right now in
mm,
honey beekeeping. But to me, I guess that would be repair if we could get there, right?
mm,
And I think there's another piece about repair in the ecology that it's important. It's like there is an opportunity for beekeepers to be a part of that conversation. What is planted, how ecosystems are restored, how many bees can be in any one place before
mm,
there's an oversaturation and that creates a competition with other pollinators. We could be doing much better in that realm with
mm,
policy. Something I think beekeepers are doing a good job of is tracking, documenting, and speaking about the need for neonic bans, both in New York and Vermont, and hopefully in Massachusetts.
What are those, Ange?
Oh, neonicotinoids are a pesticide that
Ah,
get into both the soil and the water table. There's been a push to ban them in certain Northeast states, and beekeepers have been some of the folks giving testimony that supports that
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
effort. So I think I see that as a little bit of repair, but I think none of that really addresses the people element of repair. Like what responsibility do I have as a white farmer to be thinking about land return and repair of the relationship of people to the planet? And while I am thinking about that and learning about that and thinking about what that can look like in the future, I very much still feel like I'm a learner in that space. Like I'm not,
mm,
I know exactly what repair would look like, and here was what it would look like for me. And that's not where I am. And I'm not scared to say that because I think that's really important for me to name. And I have amazing teachers and mentors and friends who are helping me move towards what that would and could look like for me in the future.
mm,
And I'm also getting to support other people in thinking about that kind of repair. I think there's actually a real opportunity in my generation to think about that and to set my generation and like one generation above me to like set some really beautiful examples of that repair. But that also requires people to be in the right financial position, resource position
mm,
to leverage that. So
mm, mm. And it's interesting because I had a conversation with someone else, and it's also just the choices we make and what we support, even just at the grocery store or the products we buy
totally. Yeah,
on the
absolutely.
most base level.
And I think when I think about I think at every level, I'm trying to be the best, not the best, but like in right relationship, right? So like in my work, I'm like, how am I in right relationship with the bees, with other beekeepers, with people who can't access this level of education? What are the ways that I can align relationship in that area? And if we can, as you're saying, do that in our small choices and our big choices, or some amalgamation thereof, because there's no
Mhm.
such thing as good. I think we're moving towards something better than where we are, and that's it, you know?
That's all you can do. That's all we
Mhm.
can do. And it ripples. I believe it ripples. I'm all about the butterfly causing the
Yeah.
tsunami. But I'm curious, Ange, what happens when a colony loses its queen?
Oh, yeah. So I think I mentioned swarming earlier, and that's when a colony will split in two. It's like usually a hive is 1 or 2 years old. It's overwintered 1 or 2 times, and it will split. So during a big nectar flow, they'll fill the whole hive with nectar. Queen won't be able to lay. She'll contract a little bit, which allows her to fly. And then at that same time, the worker bees in that hive are raising a new queen from an egg. We'll just feed that egg a special diet, raise it into a new queen. Before those queens emerge, they push the old queen out of the hive. A bunch of the older bees fill their tummies with honey, and they go out and they try to find a new location. They try to get like 2 miles or farther away and build a new hive, leave the sort of daughter hive in its place. So in the bee's life cycle, there are queenless periods. It's a part of how they reproduce. Anything we do in queen breeding and reproduction is mimicking those life cycles to be able to produce queens. But what can happen as a result of that sometimes is that that queen emerges, but she still has to go on her mating flights.
Mm.
And she's an insect, and there are a lot of birds and
Yeah.
dragonflies and predators in the world. And
Mhm.
sometimes those queens don't make it back to the hive, in which case that hive would become what we call very dramatic, hopelessly queenless.
But on point.
Because they don't have any eggs to raise a queen from, and they're just like they're getting older. And then this sort of thing can happen where then worker bees, they have the mechanisms in their bodies to lay eggs,
Hmm.
but they're sterile. So they only hatch drone eggs. And the
Mm.
drones are then again, remember I said earlier, the drones are like shooting the seed of
Mhm.
that hive out. It's sort of
Mhm.
their like last effort to get
Mm.
their genetic material into the world before that hive will eventually perish, is
Mm.
to let the workers start laying eggs to start producing more last minute drones.
Yeah.
You can rectify it. Like a hive can be, you can take a queen out of a hive, and if they have eggs, they can usually raise their own queen. But
Hmm.
sometimes that queen fails. Sometimes she doesn't come back from a mating flight. Sometimes the egg wasn't the right age, and so she doesn't quite develop right. All of those would sort of lead to that hopelessly, very dramatic, hopelessly queenless state, in which case the workers then start laying drones so they can get
Mm.
more of their seed out into the environment.
Well, it sounds so organized. It doesn't seem
Yeah.
like there's a crisis at all. And even though you say
And there's a
hopelessly
friend the whole time.
queenless,
There was a spreadsheet.
right? They're so organized. I can imagine as humans, we could learn something about being in crisis, right? Having a resolution for something if things don't go our way. I mean, I think also, too, we were talking earlier about the climate, especially with the current instability that we're feeling right now. What are the bees telling us to pay attention to? I mean, some of it's glaring in our face, but in a more subtle version, like what can they tell us?
Sadly, I think bees are very much a canary in the coal mine of much of, I think they were telling us maybe 20 years ago, something we weren't listening to, which was that the way that we're treating the ecosystem is not sustainable for the life on the planet. And certainly with bees, it's like the loss of nectar forage or trees and perennial plants, the sort of increase of varroa mite presence and the loss of nutrition have all sort of played a role in that. But I see two of those things as direct impacts from what's happening in the ecology, right? And so,
Mm.
sure, pests and entomology are always going to be a factor. And we're always going to have to be problem solving because insects, much like plants, just travel throughout the world. And if they find a host, they just kind of keep riding that wave as long as they can. But I think, yes, like that's a known factor. And another sort of obvious and glaring thing for a long time has been this pulse of like, this is not sustainable, you know?
Mm,
And it's unfortunate. I think a lot of our food system and a lot of the ways we have to support that food system are just kind of shimmying up an unsustainable, like just like
mm,
making a
mhm.
little part of a system work while so much is collapsing. As we said before, a little bit and a little bit at a time can also make a difference.
I believe that. Beekeeping requires you to stay regulated, right, in a high stakes environment. That's my feeling.
Mhm.
What practices keep your nervous system ready for this?
There's so much breath work in beekeeping. In the apiary or the bee yard, when you're working with bees, you need to be mindful of your breath, slow and even and steady. You need to be mindful of your movements. You're always trying to move at a fast enough pace, but not so fast that your movements are unfluid, essentially.
Mm.
So it requires the sort of mindfulness of movement and posturing. And then on top of that, there's a lot of lifting. I mean, like 95% of my job is picking things up and then putting them back down.
Is that on Instagram? You don't show that, do you?
So it's like, how are you? And hives get quite heavy throughout the season as they're putting on weight during different honey flows, or you're taking honey supers off of them. So, how are you moving? Where's your breath? And that is really important because when you're lifting weights repetitively and trying to move fast, it's easy to injure yourself. So, you need this mindfulness. You also need the breath work of essentially like powerlifting.
Mhm.
And those practices in and of themselves within that work really ground me in it. And then there's a ton of logistics, and planning that goes into
Oh.
beekeeping implementation
Mhm.
and there's also accepting that a plan on paper is not a plan in action and you need to be
Right.
flexible between those two things, which is a practice in and of itself.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's really important to me is like planning, having clear implementation always leads to a more easeful experience when things are high stakes, when things are under sort of the pressure cooker of time, when you're trying to get a lot done in a season, when
Mm.
you're really, really tired.
Lifting all those boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, having
Yeah.
some like clear logistical frameworks really helps us to
Mm.
know what our goals are throughout the different seasons of the
Yeah.
year.
So much centering and grounding, I imagine, in
Mm.
this work to
Mhm.
just kind of be there. But I'm curious, when you stand in the middle of one or your whole apiary and everything is humming,
Mhm.
what does that sound mean to you?
In beekeeping, there's so much sound and vibration. It changes the hum changes depending on what the season, what's going on inside the hives. Are they dehydrating honey? Are they in sort of a pollen forage moment where they're like rushing to get a ton of pollen to the hive? It's seasonal for sure. Like what is happening. I can like feel the marks of time by the
Mm,
sort of changing of the different tunes throughout the season. And then it's temperament related too. Some hives have a sort of higher pitch than others. So it's a way you can really just feel a connection to them. If you've been beekeeping long enough and have opened enough hives, like really inspected, whatever 10,000 hours worth of hives would be, it's almost like any other skill you kind of like develop. You understand a language
mm,
in that skill, right? So
mm,
for me, you can stand in a yard or open a hive and know kind of what's going on based on the sound and the vibration of that hive. And funny enough, there's now some programmers developing an app to like evaluate sound and see if they can connect that to the prevalence of disease, because that is
mm,
vibration and sound are communication tools, and pheromone and scent
mhm.
of the hives. And so why would we not be using their language to understand what they may or may not need? So it's a
That's
cool.
so fascinating. I actually heard too that someone used with PTSD patients actually
Mhm.
used the sound of
Yeah.
bees
Yeah.
for a calming mechanism to kind
Yeah.
of sort of bring down any anxiety.
Mhm.
What has humbled you most in the last year of breeding work?
We were moving our operation base from Florida to North Carolina. It was a multi-year project when that hurricane hit. So there was a lot of loss. We lost people in our community and friend
Mm,
circle. We lost community, lost housing, and farms were fractured, and relationships became hard to maintain, or just everything was fractured by that natural disaster. So that has taken me a little bit to recover from. There's also
mm,
been a loss of like federal funding for many organizations and institutions and farming and apiculture, like, and the science, the research going into supporting our work have all lost a ton of funding. And so
mm,
it's been this is less in the breeding, but more in the like, it's when you're working on innovation and production, it can feel like you're trying to like thread a needle,
mm,
like you're
mhm,
like, okay, if
yeah.
all these things line up, then we could pull this off.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
And so that disaster happened. So the Hurricane Helene followed by the sort of funding disaster, and the ongoing instability makes it really difficult to see exactly how to thread that needle.
mhm,
I think I've been really humbled by feeling the sort of squeeze of all of that and getting clear about what is my work, how do I make that happen, how do I support my community and many communities like
mhm,
as accomplice and ally, and how do I refine what I'm doing and become more resilient given
mhm,
this sort of multitude of losses. And that's not the first time in my career that it's been like many bad things. I'm like, I am 42 and I've seen that pattern in the cycle of my career
mm,
many times. At this point, I'm like, okay, this isn't going to stop happening. It's probably going to get worse.
mm.
Like,
Well,
how
it's
are we going to build some real on the ground power to
mm,
be able to survive and move through and ultimately thrive in these moments together, right? And
mm,
sharing skills and building capacity and building relationships and being more bioregionally focused where we are is it all feels like it's helping us move towards that, but it's been a real humbling feeling like we were building these like cross-regional collaborations and like this is just no, we need to get down here and work on the most important shit in the place we are
I mean, it kind of
right
makes you
now.
have to just kinda, like, pare down and just, "Okay,
Yeah,
let's
it's
do
like,
this.
hey, focus.
Focus."
I really can hear that from my inner self, my
Mm,
ancestor self is just like, all
mm,
right, focus. I'm like,
mhm,
okay,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
locked in. Yeah, it's helped me pick out what the bigger, more important things are that I need to be doing with my skills and my time and my
mm.
capacity.
If listeners could learn one thing from bees
Mm,
and apply it to their own lives, what would you hope it is?
mm. I think there's a way through the hive's life cycle, they recognize and seize on abundance when it's happening. They can go from this tiny little ball of bees with a little bit of brood to this massive triple box monstrosity of a hive in one sort of nectar cycle because they can see everything lining up in the ecology in a way that they are like, now's our moment to like
Mhm,
grow and expand. And I don't know how they do it. Like, I can't explain it. I'm not
mm,
like, you can translate that to your own skills this way. But what I can say is watching that always makes me want to refine my strategy and figure out, yeah, how to like move well in those moments of abundance and know that life is like abundance and scarcity and like
mhm.
it's chaos
Waves.
sometimes.
Mhm,
And like,
mhm.
how do I really notice the abundance, sort of celebrate it in that moment, live in
Mm.
that whatever way that it's being offered to me, and use that fortitude to push through some of the other hairy butthole stuff that I.
I love that. I love that. Should be a bumper sticker. Um, Ange, where can folks find out more about you and your work?
Yeah. So we have a website, theykeepbees.com, and I do a blog there about beekeeping, about bee practice, sort of really use that as an evergreen space to share my learning. Lots of different resources we've published over time you can find on our website about queen breeding, about beekeeping as a practice, all of that. And then we have an Instagram. also at They Keep Bees. I post there when we've got candles and honey for sale, do a bit of storytelling on there about our work and practice and the seasonality of the work that we do here at They Keep Bees. I think those are really all the socials. Oh, and on our website, you can sign up for my newsletter. I send that about once a month, sometimes once every other month. And that's a place where I do more in-depth storytelling about the seasonality of our life and work and what's happening in the bee world and how that connects to the human world and the different ways that we're working on that work.
My gosh. Ang Roell,
Hmm.
I'm so grateful for the way that you invited us into the hive, right? Not
Thanks.
just technically, but also philosophically. I really appreciate the care and intention that you put in helping us understand bees, but also cultivating a place of learning and also bringing into the world this work at They Keep Bees. So thank you for taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I hope something from today's conversation stayed with you or gave you a new way to look at things. That awareness, that pause, that's where things start to shift. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might need it. You can learn more about my work and what's coming up at sonorouslight.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at @tohumIsHuman. Until next time, keep humming.